I hear a fucking smoker.
Oh no! Kiyohime! Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for the fourth best reptilian waifu in Fate Grand Order. It's that damn lizard Kiyohime. She's a 3-star berserker with a buster deck, and there's a pretty high chance you've got one since she's the clear reward for Orleans. As is the case with a lot of 3-star servants, you get what you pay for. Let's find out why. Kiyo's first skill is Morph, a 3-turn defense buff. Later on it becomes Morph Burning Dragon, which powers up your defense a bit more and applies a burn amp against all enemies for 5 turns. The magnitude is the same as Tomoe's NP at 100% overcharge, so it's got some potential. Skill 2 is Stalking, which applies a single target defense debuff but gives that enemy an attack buff. It's a very strange demerit and one that causes a lot of problems. Given that you're using a 3-star berserker though, you're pretty much stuck with it. They don't have the luxury of holding back. That said, I'll note you can get around this drawback with purges and buff blocks. Mephistopheles, for example, can use Clown's Laughter first before Kiyo pops Stalking. His block applies 3 times, so you'd have 2 to spare. Then again, you wouldn't want to brawl with Mephisto and Kiyo in your front line, so have an exit plan. Skill 3 is Flame Colored Kiss. It's a single turn buster buff that also removes Kiyo's debuffs. Kiyohime's Noble Phantasm is Transforming a Flame-Emitting Meditation. It's an AoE buster attack and comes with both a chance to stun and a burn debuff. Both of those are tied to overcharge, though the magnitude isn't anything special on either. For the most part, it's a very straightforward kit. So let's move on to teams, though fair warning, you're gonna see more memes than usual. When you start playing Fate Grand Order, your options tend to be sparse, but as a singularity clear reward, Kiyohime is pretty much always on the table. Thankfully, she's quite easy to build around. You could always go with the many bronze berserkers, but if you pulled Lu Bu, he's the go-to. 3-turning isn't really an option for accounts this fresh, but you can realistically get both of their NPs ready for the final wave. In this situation, you stack Lu Bu's personal buffs, apply Stalking, Flame Colored Kiss, Shakespeare's party buff, and go to town. Pre-Camelot, there's a good chance there won't be a final wave when you're done. That said, this approach comes with a lot of risks. Not only does Kiyo give the enemy an attack buff, but Lu Bu reduces the defense of other frontliners. So if something does survive, you're all kinds of fucked. To hedge against this possibility, I recommend using the Chaldea Combat Uniform, which comes with an on-demand stun. This can buy you an extra turn to finish the job. As a side benefit, it lets you run a support waiver on top of Shakespeare. He extends your kill range and makes your charging more consistent. Unless you obsessively farm lotto events, there's a good chance you'll have to engage in some old-fashioned handjobs. Doing Embers once or twice is pretty trivial, but when it's half AP and you're going at it on loop, it can get very tiring. In this situation, you really just want some AoE Zerks with starting charge CEs. Like 2 0-star scopes and a limit broken imaginary element will give you what you're looking for, a substantially faster and more reliable 3-turn versus using buster chains. Only your first character needs to hit 100% by themselves. The other 2 can have Helena or another 20% party charger fuel them up. If you only have 1 scope, you can run a support waiver and a 50% CE on one of your attackers. Leonidas has quite a few synergies with Kiyohime, and you can incorporate him into your boss-killing teams. His 3-turn party buster buff makes her swole, while his taunt lets her avoid the consequences of her Stalking debuff. If you need to cycle through your party, that part's actually kinda convenient. You see, one of the downsides of using a max-leveled Leonidas is that he can realistically survive his taunt turn, like if an enemy attacks once before spamming skills. Stalking is a bit of insurance, so he retires at the right time. Now the problem is that the enemy could attack 0 times. Taunt that Spriggan and watch it roid up right in front of you. Then I guess you're kinda screwed. Kiyohime and Ibaraki have some overlap in their kits, a personal defense buff and a cleanse, namely. They also have some synergies including Ibaraki's party attack buff, but the icing on the cake is that Rashomon Daengi purges buffs. That means you can apply Stalking to an enemy and get rid of that attack buff before they can do anything with it. Under normal circumstances, this combo would solve your problem with a bit of help from a generic support. However, some fights are extremely debuff heavy, and in these situations, you'll benefit from a backline Martha. She has a party-wide cleanse and heal, and an on-demand buff purge. If Rashomon Daengi isn't available, it'll do the trick. That said, Rider Martha has a drawback in that her art stack isn't super compatible with this buster-heavy team. To get around this, I'd consider Guda Poster Girl or even a Kaleidoscope, since Taraski is a buster Noble Phantasm. Oh, one final thing. Musashi has a cleanse and purge as well, so you can run her instead of Ibaraki or a slot 3 if you happen to have her. Funny enough, 3 of this game's free berserkers have fire built into their kits. This means that you can run a buster brawl setup, and if you're in a position to NP, you can get mileage out of their typically mediocre burn effects. Kiyohime's amplifier will make sure they burn nice and toasty. As a side benefit, Cha-Cha can actually exploit the stars from her own innocent monster skill, since the ally star weight reduction actually does something in an all-Berserker team. And here's a classic from one of my old guides. Jalter's attack buff doubles on Dragon Trait allies, and Kiyohime fits the bill. So does Elizabeth, and she comes with a double attack buff for women besides herself. This means that Kiyohime gets a quad buff, and she can fuck shit up. Hulk out and make Anshin take responsibility. As a very clunky sort of bonus, Jalter applies a buff block with her Noble Phantasm. This means that you can apply stalking for free under ideal circumstances. A problem is you gotta wait a turn, and Jalter herself doesn't get the added damage since the NP comes first. So really I would just use stalking first, and save this strategy for an extended fight where your cooldowns and charge don't match up. I've talked about burn stacking teams before, and I won't spend too long going over it here. The short of it is that Tomoe Gozen can really fuck people up with her burn amplifier. You might think this makes her a natural pair with Kiyohime, but the reality is you wouldn't run them together barring some serious super scope action. They can beat people down with their buster cards, but the two of them don't especially cooperate well together beyond their first NP turns. If you want to go with a set it and forget it sort of approach, that's fine. But if you really want to get mileage out of Archer Inferno, your best bet is to find another Tomoe or save up for Yang Fei. Ah, another classic meme. The Kyo trio shows up, buffs the shit out of your enemy, and then dies. Well, that's the worst case scenario, but there is hypothetically an upside. Kiyohime has her defense debuff in both forms, but the Lancer variant also has a crit debuff. This combination means that even if your frontline wipes, you'll have a weakened enemy to finish off. If you bust your chain with her buffs up, whatever you hit's gonna be mangled to all hell. Now if it survives, it's gonna come after you with a shitload of attack and serve you up some dragon steak. But hey, that's how it be in Vegas. My advice? Keep a backline with some hard mitigation, just in case. And now we come to the final meme. The laziest meme, in fact. Now last I checked, which admittedly was a while ago, Caster Ellie has one thing completely unique to her. She has an on-demand burn that doesn't burn herself on a skill. It's a really shit burn fixed at 300 damage, but it applies to all enemies and you can combo it with Kiyohime's upgraded morph to keep enemies on fire for a long time. 10 turns, 5 of them with Kyo's debuff. Is it practical? Hell no. But it's pretty damn funny that you can pop their skills, let them die, and still have them contribute to the fight 5 or 10 turns later. Occasionally you get fights where your enemy sits there like an asshole for a few turns before blowing up your frontline. Not saying this is the greatest use of that time, but consider experimenting if you run into a case like that. Now let's move on to craft essences. Can't say there's much in the way of nuance here. Your options are buster buffs, attack buffs, and starting charge. Limited Zero for Sunrise Aerial Drive, Golden Sumo, and Kaleidoscope come to mind. K-Scope in particular gives you a realistic shot of using her NP without losing a ton of time or running a support. You see, Kiyohime has a very low attack stat, lowest of the 3-star Berserkers. You might not have noticed it too much because her personal buffs give her a lot of reach, and let's not forget about Mad Enhancement EX, which gives a sizable passive boost to her buster cards. But if you use her non-buster cards, it gets pretty ugly. So I wouldn't count on manual charging if you want the fight to end anytime soon. Cards on the table, I was always more of a Darius guy when it came to low rarity farming Zerks. He has higher unbuffed damage, which makes for fewer button presses. Then again, I mostly use my Super Bunyan on that account now. Kiyohime is serviceable as an early to mid game farming Berserker, but you'll find that her applications outside of that role get sketchier and sketchier. Stalking's drawback is a real menace. FGO 1.5 and onward is already a very tough environment for Berserkers, and giving these enemies more attack is borderline suicidal. And it's not like Kyo herself is especially well equipped to handle retaliation. Defense and damage reduction buffs are generally the least useful kind of protection for Berserkers, unless you can get a high magnitude like Ibaraki. Lacking hard mitigation or guts is pretty much a death sentence for a 3-star Zerk in harder content. Her upgrade brings up Burn Amp, a flavorful but largely ineffective addition to her kit. Unless you can stack it at very high amounts like Yang Fei, burn stacking is a solidly meme tier strategy. If my goal were to actually buff Kiyohime, I'd have gone with a single application buff block instead. I guess it's one of those things where a character is kinda kneecapped by a lore kit that doesn't necessarily make a compelling strategy. The attack on stalking adds a disproportionate amount of risk compared to the benefits of a defense debuff. In short, my take is that Kiyohime's fine early on, but falls off hard without Grail investment. Because of her drawback, she can actually be a liability later on, setting up your frontline to get wiped. Using her down the road requires a lot of care, and you're not getting a great deal at that point. Kiyohime might tempt you into making her your first Zerk, but her late game deficiencies and general jankiness give plenty of reasons to stray. But you know what happens to people who stray from Kiyohime. Alright, that's all I've got. If you're wondering why I did a Kyo guide in the middle of Saber Wars, that's because I lost a bet. I'll link the VOD of that story if you're curious. That aside, like if you like the video, subscribe for more, and give me a visit on Twitch. I stream every weekend, and we've got some spicy sub goals lined up. See you there.